So a really simple technique that gives a little bit of interest.
I'm Mara, welcome to my channel. I am so excited that you're here. I have an extra special guest with me today. I have Aleksandra from Atomic Cake Design. So she does amazing cakes. And we have her here today because we're going to talk about cakes and hosting. And we're going to show you guys how to make these beautiful cupcakes at home. I'm going to give you some tips on decorating a cake for whatever party you have, some simple ways to kind of zhuzh it up. Aleksandra, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mara. I'm so excited to be here with you guys, walk you through the steps that Mara takes to help you guys prepare and the steps that I take to make it a little bit easier for you.
So I have a few questions for you. I did some Googling and I got questions from some of you as well when we were talking about cakes, because I know that you do wedding cakes too. And at the beginning of the year, I did this trends video. So I want to ask you, what are you seeing when it comes to cakes and the trends? What are people kind of gravitating towards?
I find everyone's personal style obviously comes into play. However, most of the time what I'm noticing is a lot of whites, more petite styles. Ever since COVID started, everyone sort of streamlined things. They're still doing 2 or 3 tier cakes, yeah. But not those grandiose cakes where it just goes to waste. A lot of them are accented with fresh florals, different textures. I find it's more than anything, it's buttercream textures. So whether or not that's instead of a clean sharp edge, we're having a decal edge, which basically is like an unfinished edge around the top where the sides are very smooth still, or it's the opposite where you have that really clean top edge, but then the sides have some sort of texture on them. Okay. Whether or not that's a buttercream stencil, or just some texture with a pastry brush. So just different small techniques like that give it that extra difference between just a plain smooth white buttercream cake.
Okay. What about wedding cake toppers? Are people still doing that?
I find it's definitely less common than it used to be. Okay. Sometimes people will still have the, Mr. and Mrs. on the top, but the time of having your porcelain bride and groom on the top is sort of over. Yeah. Most of the focus is now on those textures and those really pretty florals.
Yeah, yeah, because I've seen you do some amazing flowers kind of all the way up the side. It's just, they're works of art.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so if somebody wants to order a cake, because I talk all the time, if you're hosting and you can outsource some things, right? So dessert is one of those things that if you're not a baker, don't feel bad about ordering a cake, right? It's one less thing you have to do. It makes your life easy and it'll be delicious and probably more beautiful than you could have done yourself. So if people want to order a cake, maybe you can talk about it 2 different ways. If they're ordering their, celebration cake versus wedding cake, what's the timing? How far ahead?
So typically for a celebration cake, usually 4 to 6 weeks in advance is pretty good. And I would say that sort of coincides with party planning as well as to when you're starting to bring everything together, getting a guest list finalized, because you will need to know serving size before you reach out to me so I know what size to recommend. When it comes to a wedding cake, obviously the more time the better with any celebration, but especially with a wedding cake, months in advance up to about 12 months is the sweet spot. That way you know that your date is available, and also your time, because there's often times where there'll be 2 in one day. So getting that secured in advance makes things a lot.
Time.
Yes.
Delivery time. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Makes things a lot easier.
Okay, so we've ordered the cake. Couple questions always come up. How do I store the cake? Let's say I get the cake the day before. Is that okay? Number 1. And number 2, how do I store the cake afterwards? How do I store it before and how do I store it after?
So if you're getting the cake a day before, I know it makes things easier party planning, getting it the day before, then all you need to do is set it out. If you're going that route, make sure you have enough room in your refrigerator. it needs to stay in the fridge. Your garage is not cold enough, I'm sorry. Keep it in the fridge overnight, and then about an hour or so before your guests arrive, then you can place it out, get those photos, light your candles, all of that last minute stuff.
Gotcha. Now, can you freeze it afterwards? Like, let's say it's a situation where there's cake left over. Not that I really know what that's about, but if there's that situation, what do you do with it?
You can absolutely store it afterwards. So if there's enough room in, say, a Tupperware container, you can put it in there and then put it in the fridge if it's for the next couple days. If it's a lot left over and you want to store it for longer, you can put it in the freezer. I don't like to store cake with other things. So like for meats and stuff like that, I don't like to keep it together. However, it can be done. Just take extra precaution to wrap everything in cellophane. So if you're putting it in a Tupperware container, make sure you put that like saran wrap on top of that container and then put it away, just so it avoids any, cross contamination with the smells and flavors.
Yeah. And then how long does cake stay in the freezer? How long is it good for?
There's a lot of different opinions on that. I usually recommend nothing more than 4 weeks. It can be longer. Just when you think of a wedding cake topper, that top layer that a lot of couples will preserve for their first anniversary, they will hold that in their freezer for a year. That does require even more of that preparation before you put it in there. So wrapping the cake, wrapping that container, and then putting it even into a box, anything like that, extra layers can really help.
Yeah.
So it can be done.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you want to taste it that first year, right?
For sure.
Okay, one last question before we get to some cake decorating. So you've got some really great tips for us, and I'm going to show you a couple of easy hosting stuff. Obviously not at that skill level, but still. So one last question is, I want to know, wedding cake or wedding cupcakes?
I am a lover of the wedding cake. Everyone's preference is different. I just love the statement that a wedding cake can make. Doubling your dessert with also a showpiece in your wedding, I think makes that investment worth it. You can definitely still make some, showstoppers with those cupcakes. A lot of couples would do a small cutting cake and then the cupcakes cascading down.
Yeah.
That can also make a showpiece, and also it's a lot more budget friendly when you're going with cupcakes versus a tiered cake. Keep in mind, a tiered cake does have a lot of structure inside, so it does take more time to prepare all of that behind the scenes sort of work to keep it standing throughout your reception. Whereas your cupcakes are a lot simpler, so obviously your price goes down. So that is one way, if you're doing either a wedding or a party, to cut costs, is to look at cupcakes versus a tiered cake.
Definitely. However, I will say, so for me, when it comes to wedding cake versus wedding cupcakes, I'm a fan of the cake as well, because when else can you have this showstopper? Not many times that you have this big celebration cake.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned something about the cost, for cupcakes versus a cake. And I think when it comes to hosting, if you're outsourcing, that's a different story than if you're making it yourself. If you're making dessert yourself, one thing to keep in mind is if you decide to do cupcakes, it's actually going to be a little bit more work than just whipping up a cake and throwing it in a bundt pan or something like that, and then icing one thing instead of having to ice 20 things. So there's the time if you decide to do that yourself.
And there's also, on top of that point too, oftentimes if you're trying to do something on your own, you don't have all of the tips, the icing tips, the bags, all of the sprinkles, all of those different things that I just have on hand in my kitchen.
100%.
So those are all small costs, but they do add up. So oftentimes when you do it yourself, you can end up spending even more money than just outsourcing it. So you do have to be careful what you choose to make.
Yeah. We've all been in that scenario where you think it looks really easy on Pinterest, and then you try it. And you try it the day that people are coming.
One thing I will say is when you are deciding what to outsource, outsource what you don't feel comfortable with. There's always going to be things that, oh yeah, I got this. So say that's your hors d'oeuvres or your cocktails. You can take care of that. Whereas if you've never iced a cupcake or a cake before, maybe don't have your party be the time when you're going to try.
Right, that's really good advice. That's really good advice. I agree. Now we are going to move to showing you a couple of really cool techniques that you can try at home. Aleksandra's going to show us how to ice some cupcakes, and then I'm going to show you how to ice or decorate a bundt cake 3 different ways. That's like super easy, and your guests will love it. Okay, so now we're gonna show, actually not we, you're gonna show us a couple of cupcake techniques. So if it's something that maybe you need to cut down on cost, or you don't have the budget to do something, I'm so excited to see what you show us.
For sure. So oftentimes, if you haven't iced cupcakes before, or if you have very little to no experience, it can be difficult to get that really perfect rosette with a lot of that height on it. So what I'm going to show you today is a couple simpler techniques. There's only 2 different piping tips that we're going to use today.
What's the first thing we've got to do?
All right, so I have my piping bag filled with my signature buttercream. It can be any buttercream. Mara has a great one that she can share with you guys as well.
Yeah, I'll put that in the description below for you, the recipe.
Yeah.
But you can't use, let me just like PSA you guys, you can't use like the Betty Crocker or like in the can icing to actually do this. You can, but it's not going to look like this. Right?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't taste the same, and if you're going to put the effort into actually decorating them, put a little bit of effort into making your own buttercream. It makes a huge difference, and your guests will really appreciate it.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is we're going to start with this tip here, and we're basically just going to do a squiggle. You can't mess it up. Anything that comes out is going to be good. We'll make it work. We have sprinkles to cover up any mistakes. So basically, we're just going to start at the end here and go back and forth. And then at the end, we're going to go a little bit smaller.
Oh, that's so cute.
So that is sort of the shape that we're going to start with.
That's awesome.
And then...
And I just want to mention something. The tips, you guys, I'll make sure I also put those in the description below so that you know what tips Aleksandra's using.
Okay, so after we have our little squiggle, then we're just going to do 2 small rosettes. So we're just going to go around once and around one more time.
Oh my God.
And that's it.
That looks so pretty.
Thank you. So a really simple technique that gives a little bit of interest. I went with a white buttercream today. This way, no matter what you do, it's going to coordinate with your party. I have some white sprinkles that we're going to add on there just to finish it up and just give it a little bit more pizzazz.
Yeah.
So this is just a little nonpareil sprinkle, really small, simple. I'm just going to sprinkle it on top. I try to focus in the middle strip. And then we have these little pearl ones. And these, I try to do about 5 or 6 of them. Not too many of these guys, because they are a little bit crunchy. They do dissolve in your mouth, but at first they are a little crunchy. And then if we really want to fancy it up, I have these bigger ones. And there you go.
That looks amazing.
So something really simple that can be done for an engagement party, a christening, a birthday party, anything. This can go along with it.
Yeah. And if you don't want to worry about coloring your icing, you can just use colored sprinkles, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's a great way if you want to make it a little bit more like festive. Maybe it's for like a kid's birthday. You don't need it to be as elegant. You can just add some colored sprinkles. I love it.
Absolutely.
So you showed us how to make these beautiful cupcakes. I'm going to show you how to make a cake at home and maybe just elevate it just slightly. So a lot of times maybe you've run out of time, or maybe it's a last minute thing, or maybe you just don't have the budget to hire somebody else to make a cake. This is a tip that I use all the time, and I will make my own cake. And if you put anything in a bundt pan, you guys, it makes it like fancy all of a sudden, like ta-da, this seems like a really fancy cake. But it's really just a cake mix. It's just a cake mix in a bundt pan. So this is a golden yellow, and it's not perfect. I mean, I don't know, I couldn't get it all out and shit happens. So it's still gonna taste just as good. So I'm gonna show you 3 different ways that I would use to decorate this and just kind of like elevate it a little bit. So one of the easiest ways is to just do that dusting of icing sugar. So I got my little icing sugar like sifter thing. I think it's actually a flour sifter.
I think so.
I use it for icing sugar. And then you can just kind of like put that over your cake like that.
Already made such a huge difference. My goodness.
Right? All of a sudden that looks like fancy, and all you did is like sprinkle icing sugar on it. So the other way is to take some icing sugar. I'll put the proportions in the description below for you, because I usually kind of like eyeball it. I'm sure there's like a math to it. I just can't remember right now. So I just take the icing sugar and then add a little bit of fresh squeezed lemon juice, and it will make this really nice glaze. So you don't actually need a lot of lemon juice to create a glaze. If you want it thicker, you would use less lemon juice. If you want it thinner, like more runny, then you would use like more lemon juice. I know I'm using lemon juice here, but you could do this with orange too if you like the flavor of orange.
Oh,
or
that's
lime
a good
would be
idea.
really good too. You could just use water or milk. I've seen people just do that as well. But I kind of like the tang that,
Yeah, the freshness.
yeah, that it brings. So there, and you instantly have yourself like a little glaze. And then we're just gonna like pour this on, and you're just gonna like zigzag back and forth.
Looks
Ta-da!
so good.
Ooh, yum. Okay, so this other way is to use the sugared fruit. So all you're gonna do is make a simple syrup. So that's equal parts sugar and water. You're just gonna boil that until the sugar dissolves. Once it's cooled, all you have to do is dip your fruits in that and then roll them in sugar and let them dry. Like that's it. That's it. I want to say something though. When I look online, sometimes there's people that use egg white, like they'll brush their thing with egg white and then sugar them that way. Ew. Like, ew. Don't do that. You can do it this way. Nobody wants to eat like raw egg white. I feel like that's not really like food safe. I don't know.
This is a better way.
This is a better way. And everything looks like all sparkly. So here's a way we can hide the crack, Aleksandra. Put that there. Here, I don't know. Maybe we move this back a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe just one of the little ones here.
Good idea. Hopefully that's, I can't really tell from this side if that's looking like.
Looks okay from over here.
Okay. There.
So pretty.
So pretty, so easy. And if you wanted to even, you could probably like do a couple of these together. Like you could sprinkle the icing sugar and then put your sugared fruits on top, or maybe you do the glaze and put the fruits on top, like whatever. So I just think that's really 3 easy ways to dress up just a cake mix, boxed cake mix, and make it look special. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to you, Aleksandra, for coming and showing us these awesome cupcake techniques and answering all the important cake questions. If you like what you saw here, be sure to hit like and subscribe. I'm going to put all the details that I promised you in the show notes, and also where to contact Aleksandra. So her website, check out her Instagram. You guys, the cakes are stunning. So until next time, happy hosting.
Take care.